I got thinking about this week, and I got thinking about people being on overload. And most people probably in our society today are on overload. It might be overload from mentally strained, or physically strained, or relationally strained. I mean, they're overloaded because of maybe work or school or kids or health or finances or whatever it may be. Many people are on overload. And I read this letter this week, and that's kind of how I ended up preparing my message. And listen to what this letter says. I cannot remember the last time I felt refreshed or rested. My life has been on overload for years. There are too many expectations, too many responsibilities, too many activities, too many decisions to make, and it all seems like it has to be done immediately. I often feel as if I am putting my finger in the holes of a dam, but I don't have enough fingers to stop all the holes. Even after sleeping, I still feel drained and fatigued. When I look around, I see that I'm not the only one. It seems as if everybody is overworked or overloaded. Everybody is trying to do too much. This can't be God's will for our lives, can it? In the Bible, of course, there is this guy who you probably know was overloaded, and his name was Job. You all know the story about Job, and certainly he had cause and reason to be overloaded. Listen to what he had to say in Job 6:2-3. If only my anguish could be weighed, and all my misery be placed on the scales, it would surely outweigh the sand of the seas. Jesus kind of summarizes the secrets of stress management in 3 simple sentences. What I find amazing about God's Word is it's really pretty simple. Honestly, God's Word is not complicated. It's not difficult. At least it doesn't seem like it to me. And I'm going to just talk about a verse that you guys probably all have heard and know, and how simple it is and what we can pull from this simple message today. There are 3 sentences, quite frankly, that we're going to talk about today. And first of all, what I want to tell you is this is all that you need. Okay? This is all that you need for stress management. This is all that you need for as far as any stress management goes. Really, I mean, you don't, that we have tapes and we have books and we have seminars and we have conferences and we have pills and all of this and all of that. But to be honest with you, for reducing stress, what I'm going to talk with you about today is all you need. It's all that I need. There are 3 principles that Jesus teaches us. If we can learn these 3 principles and apply them to our lives, it will change our lives. It's as simple as that. Here's what Jesus says in Matthew 11:28-30. I know you've heard these verses before. Listen to what it says. These are Jesus' words to you. Come to me, all of you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I know that you've heard these verses before. There are 3 important words that I want you to hear today. They are come, take, and learn. Come, take, and learn. These are the 3 principles of stress management, quite frankly. And it will change our lives if we understand them, and if we will apply them to our lives, it will change our life. Come, take, learn. Number 1 is we come to Jesus. In the Bible, people came to Jesus for all different kinds of reasons. I mean, they would come to him with questions that they would ask him, and they would come to him, if they needed to be healed, and they would come to him if they if they were upset, if they were frustrated, if they had conflict, if they had problems, they would come to Jesus. When they needed advice, they would come to Jesus. When they needed salvation, of course, they come to Jesus. He's the only way to salvation. What Jesus says to us, he says for us to come to him for rest. Did you know that you could come to him for rest? I mean, we read about God's Word all of the time, and we read about this, we read about that, but did you know that we can come to God for rest? I bet you never really even thought about that. Yes, you probably come to Jesus to answers for prayer. We certainly had prayer time this morning, first service, second service. We pray, certainly. We come for encouragement. We do that as well. But Jesus says that we come to him for rest as well. And he says it's a special kind of rest, which is what I am trying to get to the point today. It's a special kind of rest. He says that it is a rest for your soul, for my soul. Now, many people believe that your soul and your spirit are the same, but they're not the same. Hebrews 4:12 says that you can separate the spirit from the soul, which tells me they're not the same. We kind of know what we think a spirit is, but let me tell you what a soul is. Our soul is actually made up of our mind, our will, and our emotions. And when you think about it, what you need rest for, what I need rest for most of all is my mind, my will, and my emotions. Listen, the biggest source of our stress is probably not worn out muscles anymore. I mean, it might have been at one point in time in our lives, and it could be still for some of you, but for the most of us, it's not about worn out muscles. We don't go to bed with our muscles all sore anymore. The issue is not tired muscles. The issue is a tired mind. That's why when we wake up in the morning, we feel like we're as tired as we were when we went to sleep. Listen, what I've found out and what I've learned is this. Whatever you're thinking about when you go to bed, it's probably going to be on your mind when you wake up in the morning. Isn't that true? When you first wake up in the morning, think about this. And when you wake up tomorrow morning, what was I thinking about when I went to bed last night? I'll bet it's the same thing. Or if you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't sleep because you're thinking about what you went to bed with. What I recommend to you is, or what I try to do now is go to bed with this book. Go to bed with some peace and rest and some scriptures in my mind, and then I tend to wake up with them in the morning. The issue is not a tired body. The issue is a tired mind. And we all have tired minds. It is tension, it's worry, it's anxiety. That's what it is. And it's these problems that we think about over and over and over again in our mind that we need relief from. That's what we need the relief from. Let me ask you a personal question. How do you unwind? How do you unwind? When you're stressed out, what is it that you do? You know, some people say, well, we go out to dinner, or we go out to a movie, or we have a recreation or a sport or something like that. How do you unwind? You know, there is nothing wrong with any of those things. I'm not saying anything's wrong with any of those things, but they will never, ever give you rest for your soul. That will never relieve your mind. That will never relieve that in your mind. You need rest for your soul, your mind, your will, your emotions. You can take all the naps in the world you want to take. Absolutely. And they will rest your body, but they will not rest your soul. There's only one thing that's going to rest your soul. And when we come to that realization, then we know how important it is. There's only one thing that's going to rest your soul. Only God is going to rest your soul. That's it. Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest for your soul." Isaiah 40 verse 29 says this, "He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak." He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. What does that mean? Well, what he's saying here is if you are stressed out, the answer is not a plan or a purpose or a pill or a priority or a program. That is not the answer we're looking for. The answer is a person. The answer is a person. Jesus says to you and to me, he says, "Come to me." So what does it mean to come to me? It means that what we really need more than anything else when we're on overload is we need to spend time with God. That's what it means. Just a little bit of time with God will change that for us. I'll bet you probably your first choice when you're thinking about how to get rid of stress is probably not quiet time with God. Even though we're Christians, I'll bet that's not the first thing we think about. We think about going here or going there or doing a recreation or somehow that's going to calm my soul down. It's not going to. Over and over and over again, the Bible tells us, come to Him. Over and over. Listen, if you are running on empty today, the very first thing you need is you need to spend some time with the Lord. You need to cry out to God. It is not a pill. It's not a program. It is a person. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Step one is that. Step two is a little bit harder. Step one is, like I said, come to Jesus. Step two is give up control. Say, yes, that is harder. Absolutely. Give up control is harder. Come to Jesus is step two. Step one, give up control, step two. I can tell you why you're overloaded. I know because I know it in my own life. I can tell you why you're overloaded. You are overloaded because you're trying to control too much. Have you noticed that? When we try to control too much, that causes us to overload. Here's what it is. We think that everything depends upon us. It doesn't. It doesn't depend upon us. Listen, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but you're not the general manager of the world. I'm telling you, if you let go of that job, if you quit doing that job today, tomorrow the earth will still spin. I swear it will. If you quit tomorrow, it'll still spin tomorrow. You can resign from that job, quite frankly. The world will keep on turning. This is the truth. The greater our need to control, listen to this, the greater our need to control, the more stressed we're going to be. Isn't that true? Have you noticed that in your own life? I've noticed that certainly in my own life. The greater my need to control, the more stress I have in my life. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, I'm not a high control person. I might be married to one, but I'm not a high control person. That's what you're thinking? Probably so. Well, here's the thing. The truth is everybody is a high control person, just in a different way. I've never met anybody who doesn't want to control their life, at least in some way, at least in part of their life. Here is Jesus' second solution. First he says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. But then he says, take my yoke upon you. Take my yoke upon you. You say, well, wait a minute. You want me to take something else on? I'm already telling you I'm overworked, I'm overstretched, I'm over this, I'm over that. I don't need to take on more. I need to take on less. I am already carrying too much right now. I don't want more. Now you're telling me take my yoke upon you? More burden, more pressure, more work. Here's what that means. That means you don't understand what a yoke is. So what is a yoke? Here's what a yoke is. It's not the yellow part of an egg. That's not what we're talking about today. A yoke is a single piece of wood that brings two farm animals together so that they share the load. That's what a yoke is. They share the load. Now do you understand? Listen, you were never meant to carry all the load that you're carrying. I was never meant to carry all the load that I'm carrying. When Jesus said, take my yoke upon you, it is a symbol of two things. Number one, it's a symbol of a partnership. You know what a partnership is. It's a symbol of a partnership. What Jesus is saying here is that I never meant for you to carry all that load all by yourself. I never meant for you to carry that stress, those worries, those cares, those difficulties all by yourself. Let me help you. That's what he's talking about when he's talking about a yoke. Yoke with me, he said. Team up with me. I want to be your partner, and I want to help you carry the load that you're carrying today. He is not saying, I want to add to your load. That's not what he's saying. Quite frankly, he doesn't have a load. We're the ones who have a load. He doesn't have a load. He wants to help us with the load that we have. Jesus said, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Listen, if our yoke is not easy, that tells me, and our burden is not light, that tells me that I'm not lined up with him the way I need to be. That I'm not under his yoke. That's the proof. Listen, here's what I've learned. Every time that we become detached or disconnected, or at least in my own life, every time that I become detached or disconnected from Jesus, my stress level goes up. Have you noticed that about yourself? Every time that we become detached, our stress levels goes up. But every time that we reattach to him, my stress level goes down. How about you? It's a symbol of a partnership. The second thing is a yoke is a symbol of control. You know, farmers, they yoke their animals together. They connect their animals together so that each one of them they're going in the same direction. They're doing the exact same thing at the same time. You can't go faster, you can't go slower, and you can't end up in a ditch because the other animal's not going to follow the animal in a ditch. It's just not going to do that. Listen, we get in trouble, quite frankly, when we are not yoked with Jesus. We do. We get ourselves in trouble when we're not yoked with him. We may go too fast, we may go too slow, we may end up in a ditch. Truth is we walk really close to a ditch all the time by ourselves, when we're walking by ourselves. Here's the thing. You're going to be yoked to something. I'm going to be yoked to something. We already are. Listen, you are yoked to something right now. You're yoked to a job. You're yoked to money. You're yoked to possessions, recreation. You're yoked to something. We're always yoked to something. You know, if you're going to be yoked to something in life, then why not be yoked to the lightest and the easiest yoke that we can find? Why not be yoked to somewhere where we have a partner who is helping us through all of it and carry all of it? You know, Jesus says right here, my burden is light and my yoke fits you perfectly. You know, Jesus, of course, was a carpenter. We all probably know that. But what you don't know is carpentry back in those days didn't necessarily build houses very much. The houses were made out mud hut kind of things, and there wasn't a lot of wood in a structure back in those days. Actually, what they did, a carpenter back in those days, mostly what they did is they built furniture and or they built farm implements. They built yokes. I guarantee you, Jesus probably built a bunch of yokes in his time as a carpenter. Now, here's the thing about a good carpenter back in those days. A good carpenter back in those days, they would actually bring a measuring stick or a rule or whatever they used back in those days to measure, and they would measure the animals to make sure that the yoke fit them perfectly. It was custom made for the farm animal that they're measuring it for, so that it wouldn't rub the animal, so that it wouldn't hurt him, so that it wouldn't cause him any pain. This is what God says and what he wants to do with us. This is what God says and what he wants to do with us. Jesus says, my yoke is light, and my yoke will fit you perfectly. Custom made for you. I want you to notice that there is an exchange here. Here's the exchange. I take off my heavy yoke, the heavy yoke that I'm carrying on a daily basis. I take that yoke off and I place his light one on me. That is stress reduction there. That's what that is. That is stress reduction. I exchange all of my heavy burdens, all of my worries, all of my cares, all of my concerns. I exchange all of those things for a lighter load. You know, if you did an x-ray of your life, you would find actually that you're carrying around a lot of yokes. You really are. You're carrying around a bunch of them. You got all kinds of yokes. You got financial yokes. You got physical yokes. You got relational yokes. You got work yokes. You are weighted down with all of these yokes. Today, Jesus says to you and to me, take off all of those and yoke with me, and I will help you pull the load. Don't we all need help pulling the load? I will help you pull the load. Number 1, come to Jesus. Number 2, give up control. Number 3, learn to trust. Jesus says, learn from me. If there's anybody that I would like to learn from, it would be Jesus Christ. He says, learn from me. He's telling us right here how to learn it. He said, learn from me. What am I supposed to learn? He says in verse 29, learn from me that I am gentle and humble. Gentle and humble. Now, as I read these verses, I got thinking about it. That doesn't seem to line up with what he's talking about here. I didn't think that gentle and humble really lined up very well until I spent more time studying his verses. And what does gentle and humble mean? I mean, when I think of what he's talking about here, carrying stuff and yokes and heavy and burdens and all of that, I thought that he would talk about maybe, he would teach me endurance and stamina. That seemed to follow better in my thinking of that verse. Or I thought maybe, it might be confidence and courage. We all need confidence and courage. Or he might teach me time management and goal setting. What Jesus said was, I want you to learn from me, and I want you to watch my life. And what you will learn from me, and as you watch my life, what you will learn from me is you will learn gentleness and humility. Gentleness and humility. That didn't make sense to me at first. Well, but here's the thing. The reason why is because the two biggest concerns of stress in our lives are actually arrogance and aggression. All right? Now, I don't want to offend you. Arrogance and aggression, however. We say, well, these words don't really fit my personality, don't fit your personality. But the truth is that these two words show up in our lives on a daily basis. They really, truly do. Here's the thing. In America, when we were this tall, we learned to be aggressive. You don't believe that? Watch people play sports when they're this tall. You absolutely did learn it, and so did I. You heard things like this. The early bird gets the worm. Go for the gusto. You only go around once in life. If you want something, you got to take it. That's what we were taught. You were taught it, and so were I. We were taught to be aggressive. And that aggression, quite frankly, of not waiting or not thinking things through, causes us to overcommit. We've all been overcommitted. Have you noticed that it is always easier to get into something than it is to get out of it? Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that it's also always easier to fill your schedule than to fulfill your schedule? That's aggression. That's what that is. Filling our lives with a lot of things that maybe shouldn't be all that important to us. The other thing is arrogance. Now, what is arrogance? Again, it might not be exactly what you think it is. Here's what arrogance is. Arrogance is the idea of controlling everything. That's what it is. The idea of controlling everything. I know what's best for my life, and I'm going to go my way. I'm going to do my thing. You know what? When we try to do it all, to have it all, and to be it all, that is aggression and that is arrogance. And the antidote to those two things, quite frankly, the antidote to those things is gentleness and humility. Gentleness and humility. Did you know that the Bible said to says to humble ourselves first, and in James 4:10, first of all, it says that, and in Philippians 4:5, it says that we are supposed to also be gentle and humble. Did you know that we do those things ourselves? We have to do those things. You know why Jesus was not stressed out? I mean, think about Jesus' life. I mean, from the time that he came on the scene, his ministry, there were people around him all of the time needing something all of the time. I mean, thousands of people, hundreds and thousands of people needing something from him all of the time. And I wonder why he wasn't so stressed out. Here's why. The reason why, quite frankly, is because he did what God told him to do and only what God told him to do. That's why. And as a result, there was a sense of peace in his life. I'm betting that you have tried everything else you can think of when it comes to stress reduction. I know, sir, I certainly have too. But why not try trusting God 100%? Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest for your soul." That's where you need to rest from. Mind, that's where you need to rest from. Our mind, our will, and our emotions. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. If you come to him, I bet you it will dramatically reduce the stress in your life. Jesus says right here, "Come to me, all you who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest."